Hey guys, so in the previous video we looked at how to write to a file. Now let's look at how to read from a file. So in this case, we've written to this test.txt file. So to read from it, we're going to use something called a buffered reader. So this buffered reader, it takes in a reader. So in this case, our reader is going to be a file reader. We're going to create a file reader object, and then we're going to pass in our file. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to, we can read a single line by doing reader.readLine. And then let's just print out the contents. So in this case, that'll work fine. Now suppose we add multiple lines of input. Now we try to run our main program again, but this time we only get this time we only get the first line. So we're only printing the first line of the content out from our test file. And I guess, yeah, let's just leave it like that. And let's not write to it anymore so that it doesn't get overridden. Okay, so now say we wanted to read the second line. What we could do is we could just add on a line like that. We could do reader.readLine again. So we read the first line, so now the reader is basically at this position right here. Then we read the second line and we get that line of input. We run it, and okay, that'll work nearly fine, except we need to add in our new line right here. Plus, let's see here, /n. So the /n, it denotes a new line. We need the slash before it, because if we didn't have the slash, it would be like we were just adding an n, the character n, to our string. So we need the slash because that denotes a new line, and now if we run it, we'll see that we're going to get both lines. But this becomes a problem if we have lots and lots of lines, or we don't know how many lines we have inside of our test file. So to deal with that, let's use a little bit of we're going to use a loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a string variable called out. And now what we're going to do is we're going to read while out is equal to reader.readLine. So we're going to read from our buffer. We're going to read a single line, and we're going to store that result in our out variable. Then we're going to make sure that the input we've just read, its value is not equal to null. So we're going to read this first line, right? We're going to store trololo in out. Then we're going to check to see if the current value in out is equal to null. It's not. Okay, so that means we should go on to the next line. Okay, so then we're going to get this line right here, second line of input, and we're going to store it in our out variable. And this time, again, out is not equal to null because it has this content inside of it right here. But now we go on to this line right here. So now we get to this third line. Okay, so now we try to read in this third line, but we don't have any content in the third line. So then we're going to store a value of null. This reader.readLine, it's going to return a value of null. It's going to return a value of null, so then we're going to store a value of null inside out. Well, now this loop, this condition isn't met anymore, so we're going to exit our loop. And that's how we know we've read the entire file. Okay, so now let me rename this variable to line. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to redeclare out up here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add line. And after each line, I'm just going to add a new line. And now this is going to be trivial. I just print out, and yeah, okay, there we go. Worked just fine. So let's extract this into a method right here, a static method. String read from file, and then we're going to provide a file name. So now we're going to provide a file name. We're going to copy this code, and let's see here. We'll leave that exception stuff there. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to create a file given the file name parameter that we're being passed in. But now we're going to get a couple of compiler errors because we aren't handling these exceptions that these objects are throwing when we create them. So let's surround this guy with a try catch, and now let's also surround that guy with a try catch. Now we made one critical mistake before when we were using our buffered reader, and that was that we weren't releasing its resources after we had finished using it. So we weren't calling reader.close, so we need to do that this time. Alright, let's see here. So this is also throwing an exception, an IO exception. So in order to catch both exceptions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another catch clause. So this says if you get a file not found exception, go inside here. Otherwise, if you get an IO exception, then go inside here. e.print stack trace. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do, let's see here, are we still, okay, so now we need to return our output. So let's just do this. I'm going to declare my out variable all the way up here, and then I'm going to return it. And now what I need to do, we're getting a warning here. Actually, this is nice because it recognizes that we're not closing the reader. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to do reader.close. But there is a problem here. Remember that when we were constructing our file reader, we had to catch these exceptions. Well, suppose that we construct our file reader, right, and we read a single line of output, but then we jump into one of these exceptions because something happened during the middle of our maybe reading that caused an exception. I don't know, we just weren't able to read a line, and so the program jumped to this exception. If it jumps to this exception, well, we never finished terminating the loop terminates, of course, right? But we never hit this reader.close method down here, which means that our reader never gets closed. So what we need to do is we need to do something like this, reader.close. Okay, so now we do reader.close, right? But the problem is the reader could be null. Suppose we're up here, right? So the reader is null, and we try to construct the reader. If we try to construct the reader, when we have to construct a file reader. But the file reader might throw an exception if it can't create this file. So then it's going to throw this exception, we're going to be thrown into this catch clause right here, and then the buffered reader isn't ever going to be constructed, it's going to have a value of null. So then when our program reaches line 78, the reader is still going to be null, and our program's going to crash because of a null pointer exception. So this still isn't going to work. What we can do is we can add what's called a finally clause. This finally clause, it's called after all of this stuff finishes executing, right? So it's called after this try is finished. If it jumps into a catch statement, it doesn't matter. After the catch statement finishes executing, even if that catch statement goes into other catch statements, we're going to eventually jump into this finally clause, which makes it very useful. What we can do now is we can say if reader is not equal to null, then reader.close. Okay, so now the thing is, we still need to handle the exception for maybe we aren't able to close the reader. If we aren't able to close the reader, we might get this IO exception here, and so we still have to account for that. Okay, so this is pretty thorough code. We're in essence always closing this reader. Also note, by the way, this file reader, it's also like suppose we did this. File reader is equal to new file reader, new file, and we're just going to do that. And now we do reader, okay, let me name it something else, R2. If we do R2, we see that we can close it. Okay, so this indicates that we should always close the file reader thing that we create inside of here. But buffered reader is nice in that anytime we provide it some kind of other input stream, it's going to close it for us automatically. Okay, so you may be wondering why we're using a buffered reader instead of doing something like an input stream reader that we had. For example, we had an output stream reader up here, right? Or an output file output stream up here. Why aren't we using an input stream reader, for example, or an input stream, right? Well, we aren't doing that because buffered readers are a lot more efficient at reading and writing strings. So generally, when you want to read or write, just use a buffered reader. They're more efficient and your program is going to run a little faster, so use them. Okay, now let us test this out just to make sure it all works. Let me comment that out. Okay, let me do this actually first. I'll comment these, uncomment those guys. Now comment these guys. And now I'm just going to system.out.println read from file test.txt. Okay, run. And let's see here, why is it printing everything out twice? Okay, so we're printing contents out in here actually. So now, okay, it works fine. Okay, so just to demonstrate just to demonstrate maybe like our exceptions right here, let me change this file name to something random that we haven't actually created. If we haven't actually created anything, when we try to construct our buffer reader, we are going to jump into this file not found exception down here. So let's print something. System.out.println file not found. So we're going to get a stack trace, but just for the sake of completeness, let's just put this print statement down here too. We run this and we get our file not found exception. This stack trace up here, it comes from this right here when we do e.print stack trace. To demonstrate that we're actually closing the reader, let's go down here. Let's use the debugger. So you see that we jump into our finally clause, and now notice that the reader is equal to null. Why is the reader equal to null? Well, we weren't able to construct it because we were thrown into this catch clause, this file not found exception, when we were trying to construct the buffer reader. Now if we try to jump, we'll just return out. And that works just as expected. Let's change this back to test.txt, demonstrate how this finally clause works one more time. Let's run. Oops, not run. I want to debug. Okay, so now we're in this reader is not equal to null. The reader, it's a buffered reader. It's been instantiated, so we should be able to go in here. Now we're going to try to close it, and we don't jump into the exception, which indicates that it worked fine. Okay, so you may be wondering, I mean, this syntax looks just absolutely atrocious, because one, we have to declare the buffer reader up here, then we have to make sure that the instance isn't null, then we have to close it, but in order to close it, we need to enclose this line inside another try-catch clause. Right, so that's definitely not ideal. We can use the try with idiom or syntax that's been introduced lately, and the way we do that is we do it like this. So let me get rid of that guy right here, and what we're going to do is inside of our try clause, we're going to do this. Buffered reader is equal to new buffered reader. This is very, very nice because what it's doing in one very succinct line, one, we're initializing our buffered reader. Then we have access to the reader via this reader variable. And the nice thing about this is that the reader is going to get closed automatically at the end of this, all of this execution. So we don't actually need this reader.close. It's just going to automatically close the reader at the end of this try statement. And we run, and we get that. To prove that the reader is actually being closed, let's try reader. Oops. Well, we can't actually access the reader anymore. So I guess just go with me on faith and assume that the reader is getting closed. But this is very nice syntax. It's very succinct. You should generally try to use this. But sometimes, maybe when you're not working with I/O, with resources, you might use this finally clause when you're working with exceptions. Okay, guys. So that wraps up this video. I hope you guys got a thorough, or I hope you guys feel like you got a thorough introduction to I/O. We're going to go into this in a little more detail in the next video, and then we're going to wrap this section up. Alright, bye guys.